Lula's embrace of Xi sets up a clash over Trump's China policy. The Brazilian president is looking to Beijing to help his country's economic development. It's a strategy that risks a run-in with Trump. First, Brazil's dual game is a realist strategy. Ostensibly, Brazil appears to strike a balance between China and the U.S. by not officially joining the Belt and Road Initiative. However, in reality, Brazil understands that taking sides would harm its economic interests. Brazil is more economically reliant on China, especially for its long-term economic transformation and infrastructure ambitions. The U.S. cannot match China's speed or scale of investment. Second, China's investments are not altruistic aid. While the article portrays China as helping Brazil with regional integration and industrial modernization, this is part of China's broader strategy to secure resources and expand its influence in Latin America. China is using infrastructure projects to export its economic model and tighten its control over Latin American markets and supply chains. U.S. concerns are about containment, not support. The U.S. expresses worry over Brazil's cooperation with China, but its actual involvement is limited to rhetoric and indirect measures like trade policies to contain China's influence. The U.S.'s warnings are more about protecting its geopolitical interests than offering Brazil a better alternative. Brazil's economic dilemma is tied to Asia's rise. Brazil's pivot to Asia isn't entirely voluntary. Shrinking demand from the U.S. and Europe has left China and other Asian markets, e.g. Vietnam, Indonesia, as Brazil's primary economic lifeline. Brazil's economic strategy is more of a reaction to global realities than a truly autonomous plan. Latin American integration is a mirage. Brazil's push for regional integration is undermined by a lack of coordination among Latin American countries. Each country prioritizes its own interests, limiting the potential benefits of collaboration. Regional integration serves more as a platform for Chinese investments than as a true unifying strategy for Latin America. Brazil and the U.S.-China tug-of-war. Think of two corporate giants fighting for a client. Brazil stands in the middle, wanting China's money while trying not to anger the U.S. The truth? China offers cash, while the U.S. mostly gives warnings. China's true intentions. China builds roads and ports in Brazil, not out of generosity but to secure cheaper soybeans, iron ore, and access to Latin American markets for its own gain. The U.S. position. The U.S. warns Brazil about China, but this isn't to help Brazil. It's to stop China from gaining more influence in America's backyard. Brazil's economic reality. Brazil wants to grow stronger, but it depends heavily on China's money and Asia's markets. Its claim of not choosing sides is more wishful thinking than reality. Brazil's growing dependence on China's economic framework may lock the country into a subordinate role in the global economy, reducing its autonomy and making it a supplier of raw materials and an importer of high-value goods. This trajectory is not openly discussed because it reveals a stark reality that many overlook. Brazil's perceived development strategy is increasingly shaped by external forces rather than its own long-term vision. Brazil's growing dependence on China's economic framework may lock the country into a subordinate role in the global economy, reducing its autonomy and making it a supplier of raw materials and an importer of high-value goods. This trajectory is not openly discussed because it reveals a stark reality that many overlook. Brazil's perceived development strategy is increasingly shaped by external forces rather than its own long-term vision. Brazil's economy will remain tied to global commodity cycles, leaving it vulnerable to price fluctuations and external demand, particularly from China. While Brazil claims to maintain a balance between China and the U.S., the deepening reliance on Chinese markets and investments will limit its ability to act independently in global trade. As China expands its Belt and Road Initiative in Latin America, Brazil may find it increasingly difficult to negotiate favorable terms without aligning with China's broader agenda. Brazil's trade policies could become an extension of China's economic strategy, further eroding its negotiating power with other nations. The development of transportation routes and ports connecting Brazil to the Pacific may look like regional integration, but these projects are primarily designed to serve Chinese trade interests. This infrastructure positions Brazil as a key supplier to China, rather than as an independent economic hub. Brazil's infrastructure will facilitate the export of resources but fail to foster domestic economic diversification or technological advancement. By deepening its ties with China, Brazil risks becoming a focal point in the U.S.-China rivalry. The U.S., concerned about losing influence in Latin America, may impose economic measures or political pressure on Brazil. These actions could destabilize Brazil's trade relationships and slow its growth. Brazil may face economic penalties from the US and find itself trapped in a geopolitical tug-of-war, unable to fully capitalize on either relationship. The focus on exporting agricultural and mineral resources to China is likely to intensify environmental degradation and resource depletion in Brazil. This short-term economic boost comes at the expense of long-term sustainability. Brazil's environmental assets, such as the Amazon rainforest, could face irreversible damage as the country prioritizes meeting China's demand for commodities. Brazil is taking Chinese money to build roads and ports, but these projects are mostly designed to help export raw materials like soybeans and iron ore to China. It's like paving a highway to ship your best goods away while buying expensive imports you can't produce yourself. Brazil thinks it can stay neutral between China and the US, but the reality is different. The more it relies on China for trade and investment, the harder it will be to say no to China's demands. At the same time, the US might punish Brazil for getting too close to China, creating problems for businesses and workers. Those new roads, railways, and ports might look great, but they are designed to serve China's needs, not Brazil's long-term goals. Instead of helping Brazil grow stronger, they make it easier for other countries to take what Brazil produces. To meet China's demand, Brazil is pushing its farms and mines harder than ever. This could lead to damaged ecosystems and fewer resources for future generations. The Amazon rainforest, a global treasure, is at risk of being overexploited.